Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Coffee with Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and today I have with me Michael King. Michael is the founder and CEO of T.E.A.M.S.COACH LLC and a highly sought-after executive and business leadership coach. He helps business leaders clarify and execute at the highest levels through his proprietary T.E.A.M.S methodology to develop measurable business growth and company-wide collaboration. Pretty succinctly said. Michael, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Let's go back to the beginning. Not Genesis 1:1 beginning. Let's go back to the beginning of your like superhero origin story as a coach. How did you come to be a coach, or maybe realize that you were a coach, kind of had those sort of attributes already, and maybe somebody like mentored you or advised you along those lines? And then how did you go from there to starting your coaching business?
Man, I'm glad that, thanks for asking the question. And I'm so glad that you gave the Genesis reference. I feel like that is so appropriate for what I get to talk about. So I actually started off in my leadership impact career, being a pastor, and started off as a Christian music recording artist. So which I get to kind of revisit right now, just as something as a hobby, which is pretty fun. So we have music available out there as well. But yeah, for a couple decades, I found myself sitting in this number 2 seat within the church, serving lead pastors, and kind of like in a mega church type environment. But I always found myself sitting in the seat that was the guy that was helping developing the systems and strategies for somebody who had this incredibly compelling vision. And I was kind of the mastermind behind helping making everything work. And in that same space, figuring out how to develop leaders that reflected the culture, the vision, and the values of the organizations along the way. And it was going so well that I started to get reached out by other organizations and schools and universities and people that do keynote conversations, et cetera. And somewhere along the way, I decided, you know what, I think that I want to go back and get my master's in organizational leadership and just kind of see what this is about. Found out about this thing called executive coaching, and I never really looked back. In about 2015, I specifically felt like just this nudge in my gut that maybe my best impact is going to be outside of the local church. And so even though I still have an opportunity where I keep a very, very limited amount of my bandwidth dedicated to nonprofit and church leaders, because it's some of the most difficult places to lead in. So I'm still very committed to helping leaders that are transparent and authentic enough to want and deserve help in that space. But now about 70 to 80% of what we do is with larger enterprise C-level leaders and their teams, and really locking in ways to execute their vision in ways that they've never have before, and get the results that they've always wanted in ways that are healthy and can be replicated and scalable.
I really love that like the clear commonality there is like organizing people is pretty much the same, whatever your endeavor is trying to be: organizing, motivating, connecting, collaborating, growing, scaling. A lot of the core principles are the same. And I love that you started out there at the foundation, where you were doing the foundational work behind the scenes, seeing how everything connects, making things happen, developing leaders, past, present, and future. And you're just like looking around and like, I know how all of this works. And this applies to just about anywhere. This applies to almost anywhere I can think of. And then I just love that from that realization, you took that step. And you were like, I can do this in so many other ways. I could still serve where my beginning, serve where my heart was and still is, and find so many other ways to serve. I love that journey, that process. It just reminds me of how every coach I talk to, it's their journey is so specific and unique to them. It really is. And yet you can see these common notes. There are these common notes, these moments of realization, this desire to serve, this desire to give back, to take and apply and translate the lessons and principles and frameworks that they've come to understand one way or another, and then help other people to build them and execute them themselves. It's like these values are core and common, and yet the journey is always so specific and unique. I love getting to talk about that with people. It's kind of great. So yeah, you're to the surprise of no one, not to the surprise of me, you are unique and also have a great deal in common with all the other servants and coaches I get to talk to. It's awesome. No question there. I just kind of wanted to compliment that.
Oh man, that's super cool. And it's great to be a part of that type of community. One of the things, like, you kind of, when you're in church leadership, as much as I would love to be able to say like that, everybody's just this automatically this high level, humble leader. There's also this idea sometimes when you're in church leadership that you almost have to fake humility sometimes. Like you're not actually allowed to say, hey, I actually might be good at this. And so it took me a little bit of time to actually do the mind shift to make a big step out of church ministry, because I knew in my gut that there was something bigger that was intended for my life. I knew that I was good on it, but I didn't know if I was actually giving myself permission to say, hey, I'm actually really great at this. So let's kind of see where it goes. And so now I don't resent my story at all. I think before I used to be kind of like really tongue in cheek about, I used to be a pastor. But now I get to work with some of the most amazing, even church leaders, and also some of the best entrepreneurial leaders that I've ever met in my life. So incredibly grateful for what I get to do.
I really dig the way you framed that distinction between humility and like self-deprecation and sort of like negative self-talk, because there's a certain kind of humility that doesn't allow you to acknowledge what you're capable of and what you're good at. And it's almost like it's more of as opposed to freeing you to pursue the work you want to pursue, it almost traps you in a certain kind of negative feedback loop. And I love that I love the way you framed it and the way you realized that distinction. And you were like, in some ways, this particular form of quote unquote humility is sort of like holding me back or inhibiting me in some way, and realizing that you could still be a humble servant and acknowledge the fact that you're dang good at some things. And it's important for you to be able to acknowledge that, because that's the first step to really sharing them. It's so powerful. I just love that. So 100%. I keep not having follow-up questions. I'm just excited to chat about this stuff, which I always bump into this too, because this is supposed to be a short podcast. And I'm talking to people who I would love to talk to for hours. And so I'm like, I definitely have to like squeeze things down as best I can. So
we're all good.
Good. Let's move things into, we already kind of have, but move things more into the present. Let's talk about your coaching business today. Who do you coach primarily, and how do you coach them? Group coaching, one-to-one, keynotes, et cetera. And then do you have a particular area of focus? Obviously it sounds like your focus is across the board, but primarily in the executive suite, so to speak, and their teams.
Yeah. I think the cadence is really important here in everything, because ideally at the end of the day, like whoever tells the best story wins. But who are the ones that tells the best stories? It's always the organizations and the teams that are operating at the highest levels of productivity and creating the great stories along the way. The organizations that have great levels of chemistry, high levels of emotional intelligence on the teams. But who's leading those great teams? It's always the leaders that have the best, the most compelling vision, and the highest levels of authenticity, transparency, high levels of ingenuity and innovation. And so the name of my company is T.E.A.M.S.COACH, because it makes it simple. Because ultimately at the end of the day, I want to be able to get with your team. But it always starts with the senior leader. And so I would say 70%, 70 to 80% of all the teams that I coach in their higher level enterprise, big business, some Fortune 500 companies, it starts off with me working with a senior leader, whether it's a vice president or a president, CEO level, or the full C-suite within the organization. But the cadence goes from a week-to-week engagement with them to a monthly engagement with C-suite, and then to a quarterly engagement with the enterprise. But it always comes down to, is the senior leader willing to do the hard work? Are they willing to think and to really do some self-reflecting, and maybe even ask themselves some hard questions about their own personal leadership lid, maybe some fears, insecurities, aspirations, dreams that haven't been fulfilled yet. And also breaking through imposter syndrome, because that thing that we just talked about, fake humility, the number one thing that costs organizations more money than anything is because a senior leader is dealing with imposter syndrome. And so they try to be something that they're not, which turns an organization into trying to be something that it's not. So they're chasing after and they're trying to replicate things that they were never meant to do in the first place. And yeah, I mean, so that's what I get to do. And I love it because it's transformational. I get to see literally the miraculous happen in front of my life. I see leaders get hope and life and vitality restored back to them. And I see them get wins that they never thought they were possible before. And so that's really the point, you know?
I love that. There's a word that constantly comes up in these kinds of conversations: clarity. That moment where it's like, there's a lot of leaders for a lot of different reasons, imposter syndrome, but then like, so maybe why do they have imposter syndrome? Maybe they're just not seeing themselves clearly. Maybe they're not seeing their environment clearly, or just how they're leading clearly. It feels like a coach, one of the most powerful things, maybe the most powerful thing that a coach can provide is clarity. And that clarity comes from being able to provide a leader an outside perspective that nevertheless still connects with and cares about them. And I bump into this sometimes too, actually quite often, where you think about like a familial relationship, like your family, like hardly anybody ever knows you as well as your family, or like close friends or people you've known for a very, very long time. However, those kinds of relationships they could be very deep intellectually and emotionally. However, those relationships do come with certain kinds of baggage. You know, there are certain kinds of influences that come with those long-term relationships they're great, but it also can make it very difficult to see yourself reflected in them very clearly. Again, there's kind of a lack of clarity in certain ways there. And what a coach really, I think, excels at is that ability to come in and build a familial type relationship, at least in regards to how deep it is emotionally and intellectually. But without any of the baggage that comes from, like, you know, you're married, or, you know, you grew up together, or, you know, this person raised you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then really show you, it's like, okay, we've connected. I care about you. You can sense that, you know that we've talked, we've grown, we've had our relationship grow. What do you see now? And then all of a sudden, and then like you were saying, that moment when you see the light dawn on their face, you know, where they're like, they realize something that's been happening in their lives, or something they've been doing or not doing for a long, long time. And suddenly it's clear right in front of them. And it's almost that moment of clarity is also a moment of action. Because I feel like once the moment clarity strikes, it is simultaneous with that first step forward into, I mean, I don't mean to dramatize it, but a new reality for you, where you're like free from the burden of, especially like something like imposter syndrome is just so frightfully common in a lot of our leaders. So yeah, once again, I just keep finding myself with no questions, just like chatting back and forth. This is my favorite part. This is the conversation back and forth. So I love it. I love the way you identified that moment of clarity, and that building of that clarity as just really like just that moment that sparks a leader and really drives you in your coaching practice.
Well, we went down this path a little bit about talking about this, you know, this moment of clarity, imposter syndrome, the why behind why this stuff even exists in the first place. Everybody has a story, you know, but I mean, I have a million stories about me working through this, even as a leader myself. But you know, the things that we hear determine the things that we think about, and the things that we think about determine how we feel, and then the way that we feel determines the decisions and the behaviors that we make in our life. And probably the number one mistake that I made, you've heard this saying that says this, that you are the sum average of the 5 loudest voices in your life.
Yes.
I've made the mistake of actually thinking that I just had to deal with the hand that I was dealt. The 5 loudest voices in my life of me growing up, and even eventually becoming a pastor, stepping into that world, I couldn't believe how dysfunctional some of those 5 voices were. And I couldn't believe like how self-serving some of those 5 voices were. And as soon as I actually made that shift, understand, wait a minute, if I want to be a better dad, I'm going to put a better dad in my circle. If I want to be a better person and think differently about finances, I'm going to find somebody who's a rock star with finances. But understanding that when it comes to getting clarity and to be able to see things that you've never seen before, if there's one thing I could tell other coaches to make sure that they don't miss out on, is the ability to help your clients see something that they've never seen before, and to explore something different and better and life-giving and free. And in that moment, what you just said, that aha moment, that moment when that clarity comes on.
Yeah.
I have literally sat in front. In fact, even earlier today, I had a session with one of my clients, and I recognized 6 months into this, she's a completely different person than who she was 6 months ago. And it was a pretty awesome, powerful moment.
It really is great what we get to be a part of, isn't it? It's almost, I mean, you think about it, and it's such a, and again, I don't mean to use an overly dramatic word, but it really is a blessing in the sense that it's a service that you're able to provide that also it has these radiating benefits, sort of like how you were talking about how you start with your executive, you start with your team leader, your president, vice president, whatever it happens to be. because the way that that works is that whatever work you do with that leader naturally radiates out into their team, into their family, into the other people they have in their life. And so it's really that way for your coaching to have this almost exponentially magnified power. And yeah, it's just to be able to be present for it it really is a blessing. It really is magical. I keep coming back to these words that sound fantastical, but that really is the way it is. I just keep wanting to drive that home to the audience.
Well,
like, it really does feel like this.
Well, and out of all the words that you said, I love the fact that you dropped the word fantastical at the very end there. I was like, I'm in, like, this is good. No, I think it's great. And we have to remind ourselves too, as leaders too. And, there's multiple different ways that I think about this with the people that I get to serve, but whatever we make visible are the things that we eventually attract. And so as a leader and as a senior leader, as a human being, we have to recognize the things that we choose to elevate and the things that we choose to project out of our lives. Somehow we're in this universal game of ping pong, and we're always going to be matched up with the things that we project. So that was a brilliant analogy. Wasn't it so good? Right, man.
I loved it.
Fantastical universal game of ping pong.
Yeah, I've still got my ping pong paddle stored away somewhere back from I guess what I might call my good old days. I guess when I used to play a lot more ping pong than I do.
we got a ping pong table in the basement. My daughter's in varsity tennis, so she can now school me hardcore.
Nothing like being exceeded by the next generation. It's a little bittersweet, but mostly sweet.
It is mostly sweet. Yeah. You kind of know you've arrived when that moment, not really necessarily arrived, but you feel like you might have done at least one thing right in your life.
Yeah. Speaking of, I guess, the next generation, I'll just segue into what's coming next for you in your coaching business. I mean, we're already almost done. When we're recording this, we're almost done with April. So this year is flying by. But what's coming up in the rest of 2022 for you that you're excited about or want to talk about?
Well, I'm excited just because as my clients are transforming and evolving, so am I. This is something where as a leader, I have to consistently grow. And I always tell other coaches this too, but never trust an executive coach who doesn't have an executive coach. And so, so just this past couple months, I've brought on another executive coach for myself to take me to the next level. And he's somebody that I've dreamed of working with for a while. And so I'm very excited to work with him. I just signed with a new agency that's handling all of my speaking engagements. And so I'm thankful that COVID's done and that I get to go out. I've narrowed down my 5 topics of what, the major things that we feel like for 2022 and 2023 that every single leader and organization needs to hear, that are kind of the life or death moments right now. So I'm excited about that. These podcast tours have been a blast for me, but even more importantly, I think, is that finding that sweet spot of being able to clearly identify who our ideal clients are and to serve them in a way that's comprehensive and breathtaking and meaningful. So those are kind of the things so this year I've brought on, I have media staff, I have marketing staff now, and I have 2 other associate coaches who are helping spread out my bandwidth a little bit better. So, so overall, I feel like, and then the innovation that's happening within our T.E.A.M.S.COACH app, so we can have better, smaller rhythms of accessibility that are more meaningful. So, I think there's a lot there, but at the end of the day, like, I'm getting better at this. My team there are rock stars. They're so good. And there's so many compelling stories to tell. And I think that where things are going, this is a fun time to be in business and in leadership, by the way, because all the rules changed over the last few years. Mm-hmm. And so you and I are in spaces where we get to actually determine what the new rules are. And that's powerful and that's meaningful.
It's almost a little bit heady. I get, and almost every day it occurs to me how grateful I am and excited to be in this space right now. It is just because, yeah, it's honestly, the way you describe your business right now is the way I think of the whole industry. There's just this rising tide where it's not just like one thing or 2 things that are advancing or moving forward. There's just this whole element, this whole area that's just just growing and scaling at a rate that's just, it's really exciting to be a part of it. I guess that's yeah, it's just, I'm stoked every day.
Yeah. Like when, you know, for a real quick example of that, and I know this is supposed to be short form, but
we'll close it out with this.
But for example, you know, we've been talking about emotional intelligence being one of the most important things that organizations can really be talking through probably for the next decade or so. Mm-hmm. Well, we've already been talking about this before 2018 and 2019. And we've been working with teams to making sure that we actually put into their weekly development matrix ways to actually measure culture and to actually intentionally develop emotional intelligence within their organizations, because we found that these are the things that give us the best KPIs and the best ROI, the best return. Mm-hmm. And so now it's 2022, and guess what? It's no longer optional for you to not be an emotionally intelligent organization.
Yep.
And so myself and my team it feels like we're fitting into the shoes that have been prepared for us. And this is exciting because we have been in this space. We've been speaking on this for quite a while. And the leaders that we are connecting with now, I feel like we're kind of been built to help people prepare for these moments that we're in right now. And it's been just absolutely fun and exciting and meaningful to be a part of it.
I love that. I think I might make that the title of this episode. Emotional intelligence is no longer an option. Or something to that effect. I'll workshop.
Absolutely. Do it. Run with it. Like I will take.
It's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Agreed.
Where can people, we talked a little bit before I hit record about how important it is to be active on social media and just kind of available and out there, and how much work it is. But that said, where do you like for people to find out more about you, and also connect with you and just kind of start building a relationship? Do you have a preferred social media platform that you find to be the least toxic or time consuming? And also let's talk about your website and where people can just learn more.
Yeah. Well, my website is the same as my company name. So just T.E.A.M.S.COACH. And everything about us gets wrapped up in that word teams. By the way, that's our coaching methodology as far as how we coach leaders on a week-to-week basis as well. So there's more information on how we do that and why our teams methodology actually helps you get to sustainable and functional results incredibly fast. So there's that. But follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Follow me even on Twitter. The content, you're not going to be pulled into some sort of weird click funnel vortex by becoming a friend of mine or reaching out to me. In fact, I always give out my cell phone number at the very end of these things, because my team and I, we've gotten to the space of where we want to be approachable. But what you're going to do by following us on social is you're going to consistently see professionally produced content in which we're just helping serve the leadership space wherever people are at. And we found literally that, just like I told you before, whatever you make visible is what you replicate. We find ourselves just through our partnerships with different media, like here, I don't know where you're located at, but I'm in the Omaha area, in Lincoln area. So we have, okay, fantastic. So we have partnerships with the Lincoln Journal-Star and the Omaha World Herald, and that group of folks that do some great job of just spreading content that we put out on a month-to-month basis as well. So anyway, just lock in Facebook, Teams.Coach, Michael King, Instagram, Teams.Coach as well, Twitter, Michael King Jr. And then feel free to reach out or just send me your number. Is that okay if I give my cell phone number real quick, and then you can do whatever you want with that?
If you want this on the episode, we'll broadcast it to the world, to the hundreds that listen.
Yeah, well, it's, I'll tell you why I do this in a minute, but my number is 763-245-4984. And feel free to put that in your show liner notes, and people can text me any question that they have, just a quick question on leadership, or if they want to hop on a Zoom call with me. But we decided a long time ago that we wanted to be the approachable coaches, and not everything's a sales transaction. And so we lead from a place of being not transactional in our relationship endeavors, but true relationship and transformational experiences. So we do whatever we can to just try to be as approachable as we can and to serve people where they're at.
I think we couldn't close on a better note. Michael, thank you so much for the time we've spent and the little bit of extra time. I promised that I would try to keep it to 15 minutes, but this was just too good of a conversation. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying, and thank you for going a little bit long. with me today. I appreciate
Dude,
it.
man, you're great, man. Let's connect again. And I'd love to be able to continue to spar with you a bit on this. This is really good.
Yeah, this is fun. I mean, the antidote to a too long podcast is always a part 2. That's what I hear.
All right, let's do it, brother. I'm all game.
All right, Michael, thank you. Audience, thank you so much for listening. Find Michael, reach out, call him, text him, anything you want. As you could tell, he's great to talk to. And we will talk to you again very soon.